So today's question is from a freelancer from Canada. He says, I'm desperately looking for clients so I can pay my rent on time. I keep sending pitches and follow ups, but people just keep disappearing on me. I keep over analyzing every word I wrote, trying to figure out if I piss them off somehow or if I price myself too high. I want to follow up again, but I don't want to sound desperate. What should I do?
I don't think that this person is desperate. I think this person is experiencing a prehistoric survival glitch. Okay, let me explain. Your brain thinks that the silent client is a predator in the bushes and their survival, their social survival is at stake. So they're literally in a fight between, the predator and themselves in an inbox.
It's enough to drive anyone nuts.
I think it is totally driving everyone nuts. I think if I get something like that in my inbox, I would definitely fly, freeze, everything else. And then I'd think to myself, like, I'll get emotionally completely gone in it. And then I'll start with my cognitive overthinking, and I will get so desperate that I'll send a mail that I'll regret. I
Hmm.
don't know what you think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that happens. That happens. Like you subconsciously have to tell yourself like whether or not it's right to send a follow up message, but it keeps you up at night. Like, I personally, I'd rather regret doing something rather than not doing anything, right? But again, comes with a lot of dilemma. So, but what's happening on both sides? Like, what's happening on the side of the freelancer who needs, like, the person, they need to pay the rent. Every project matters, every client matters, and this is a client they've spent like perhaps weeks with, making pitches. Making a pitch in itself is a very very arduous exercise. So making a pitch, doing a discovery call, then trying to convince the client, then sending a follow-up message, then there is internal tussles happening, then there is a boss over a boss over a boss, and all of that crap happening, and then the person just ghosts you, like.
Yeah, no, I look, some people are just assholes, right? But besides some people being assholes, I think sometimes what we have to also understand is that the client is also in survival mode, because when you're asking them for a decision, they are also in fear or flight mode. So
Yeah.
it is such a prehistoric glitch, and it's there on both sides, right? So the client is also like, now, okay, now there is a question that is asked of me, so now where do I flee? So that is actually also happening with the client, and I think it is really critical for us to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the client and ask ourselves this critical question:
Yeah.
how can I make this more certain for them? How can I make this safe for them? How can I build my narrative in such a way that it can become safer for them psychologically to say yes?
Or to convince their stakeholders or peers or whatever, that this person is actually right for me, this is somebody that I genuinely need for the company, that it's okay to pay like thousands or lakhs of rupees to this person, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And if you look at the way in which this works, I think it's really critical for you to know how the approval system works in the client's office.
Yeah.
Like, how many people does your immediate contact actually have to convince? What are their personalities like? How as much information as you can get on his context or her context, it will make a massive impact on the way in which you're behaving with that contact. So probably a little more empathy, probably a little more ability to suss out what the situation is, probably a little bit of timing as well, to understand exactly, is a Friday the best time to actually do this ask, or is a Monday, or is a Tuesday? And it depends on situation to situation.
Yeah, but there are a lot of things that are going on both sides of the coin, right? A freelancer
Mm.
is basically a freelancer or an agency or whatever. They're basically an outsider. They don't know
Mm.
what's happening in the company, and until they become a part of the company, the client
Yeah.
doesn't really explain to them that
Yeah.
this is not me. This is my tribe doing it or whatever, sort of a thing, right? So freelance is basically just an outsider trying to look in and not knowing whether or not they have the allowance or the permission to get inside that closed door, right? But it creates a lot of anxiety. It's very normal to be anxious. It's basically like a lion came to kill you, and then he sunk his teeth into you, but then he's not able to decide whether or not to suck your blood.
Okay, I think you're confusing lions with vampire bats, maybe. But let's get to the biological lesson out here. I think
Yeah,
it's really important for you to manage your own biology, for you to manage your own survival mechanisms.
yeah.
And you got to ask yourself, you got to give yourself that time. Okay, how much time do I really need for him or her to get back to me? Right?
Hmm.
That's a really good question for you to understand. And that is clearly connected to your paying the rent and you're doing all of that. So time it in a way that whenever you're asking that question, even though you might feel, really scared to ask that question, because a lot of times this happens, you push this out to the last minute because again it's biology. And then when you ask this question, it's already too late. And then when you ask this question and the person ghosts you, then you're in massive thing, and then you want to immediately ask questions. Now
Yeah.
reverse this process, right? Time it well so that your prefrontal cortex is able to actually time the initial message well,
Hmm.
and time the follow up well as well. What do you think?
And I think it's also very important not to rely on one client at all, right?
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, you're not the decision maker, or even the client might not be the decision maker. There might be a lot of different things going on. So I'll give you an example, right? I had this great project coming my way, and it was one of my alumni who was bringing in the projects, and we had,
right.
I think, around 15 to 20 round of calls
Mm,
with him, with his boss and boss's boss, and all of that thing. And it was almost done, right? Just the last signatures were left. At the last minute, there was an internal reshuffle. And the HR got changed, and the HR said that we don't want to outsource this thing, and all of that stuff happened. And the client actually ghosted me. It was my alumni, and he ghosted me.
oh
Right now,
no.
at that time, the mistake that I made was I was banking on that one project, because,
Yeah.
and sort of, I won't say that I was completely at fault, because the project would have been that sort of a thing. It would have taken all of my bandwidth,
Mm,
right? But the mistake I made was that I made it for certain that I'll get that client.
yeah. No. So that
So you
sort of
have
assumption is the mother of all massive screw ups,
Correct,
right?
correct, correct. And ghosting is like a normal part of a freelancer's life, right? It's going to happen. Somehow, clients seem to forget that common courtesy that we have to tell the person that, boss, sorry, this is not going to happen. That other person's time also matters a lot, right? And they have much more riding on you than you have riding on them. They somehow forget about that. So and it's easier to run away from a confrontation rather than, have to apologize to the person for wasting
Yeah.
time. So like ghosting is going to happen, so you have
Yeah.
to balance out your time, and keep that assumptions that if I get this project, these are the resources that I should have on standby. But at the same time, I should have at least two or three processes going parallelly, so that even if like 75% of them drop, I still have 25% to at least make my rent,
And
right?
here's the interesting thing. I mean, this is the time for a war story or two. But the really interesting war story is that
Yeah,
it's always the young people who get killed first in war, and it's the older people who survive. Okay, the people who have got
yeah,
the experience of war, right?
yeah,
Because they know how the war is played out. And
yeah.
if only they could transfer those lessons to the younger people who don't have the experience, so they're getting impatient, so they get up and they get shot or something like that, right?
Hmm.
So I think this is really, really critical for a young freelancer who's ambitious and impatient and wants to grow, to understand that this is going to be the case. And this is where you have to build a pipeline in order for you to calm yourself down. You have to make sure that you're talking to at least 10 clients, knowing fully well that about six of them are going to ghost you. And
Yeah,
that will probably calm your nerves down, because you're going to see the ghosting as a no, right? So I would rather you take the ghosting as a no, okay, rather than push and become desperate and then say, okay, should I discount the price,
yeah,
should I do this? And this is all going internally, right? Nobody
yeah.
else is thinking like that for you. This is all going internally, and you're still like struggling with it. Instead of that struggle, why don't you struggle to find more prospects?
Yeah, that is true. There is this theory called the Zeigarnik effect. So it's
Okay.
basically that the incomplete things stay a lot on our minds.
Yeah.
We keep on obsessing about the incomplete things, and when the person isn't
Mm.
getting back to you, that's the classic case of an incomplete thing, because
Yeah.
you are neither able to filter that out into like a closed one project, nor into a dropped project. Like, what the hell is going on? That creates that creates that like complete goner of a dopamine effect, right?
I
So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. This is really critical. Probably the best way in which I can advise this person is to say, I will close this as soon as I do the ask as
hmm.
well. I will close this in my mind. It's on them. It's closed. I will move on to new things. And that is probably the best way and the most sensible way to survive with this ghosting thing.
Yeah, I mean, always have some parallel processing going on side by side. Now, like, imagine if it is a very big program going on in the computer, right? And if one code breaks, everything goes for a toss. But at the same
Yeah.
time, there are parallel processing going on. It's like electricity, right? You never have all the connections of the house in a series. You
Yeah.
always have them in parallel, right?
Yeah.
Because even if one fuses out, you still have something's going on in the process. You
Yeah.
don't have to wait for the electrician to come in the morning and spend your
Yeah.
night in the night in the dark,
Absolutely.
right? So
Absolutely.
it's the same way. Like, you have to balance things out, and I think the biggest anxiety creation happens due to the waiting period. It's not because something gets dropped. It's not because something gets overwhelming. It's mostly because it's a waiting period. You don't know what will happen. You don't know your future. Everything is uncertain. Everything is unstable, and you're ticking nearer to that 30th when you have to pay your rent, right? So at that time, even if you have a number of things moving in the parallel, at least it gives you some some what do you call it, placebo effect, that things are moving forward whether or not they actually are.
I'll tell you, if I look at it from a storytelling lens, a narrative lens, thousands of years ago, you had a situation where if the tribe ignored you, you died, right? So
Hmm.
essentially, silence is equals death. So if I look at silence equaling death, then you're in a situation wherein this exile that you're feeling when a client doesn't reply is directly connected to your amygdala, which triggers the same neural pathway as pain, as physical pain. So your brain is just trying to keep you out from being left in the cold.
But this is not the Stone Age.
I think that tell your lizard brain that this is not the stone age, right? It labels the silence as danger, and when you're in danger, you don't send bold professional emails, right? You hide, and that's why you're paralyzed.
Hmm, that's true. Like, you have to equate being ignored by a marketing manager like to getting eaten by a tiger.
I don't know where we are going with this, but okay.